Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. This is the podcast where we're exploring the digital revolution and all the crazy implications it's having on our world, our professional lives, our personal lives, and that tiny little space that sits in between them, if it's still there at all. And we're delighted to have today the CIO and VP of IT from Smith College, Samantha Earp, as our guest. Samantha, great to have you.
Love being here.
Great. Samantha and I are both at the Workday Rising event in Orlando, and Workday for almost since its inception has been quite strong in the higher education market. So Samantha, tell me a little bit about what's going on. I mean, every business, every industry has been through a lot of upheaval, the role of CIO, the role of IT. What's going on at Smith with you and your team?
Well, there's a lot going on, and we're in the middle of a massive transformation of our IT systems. I'm just starting my 7th year at the college, and I came to the college to really do this big lift of all of our systems. And the thing that brought me to this was not the technology. Maybe that's not cool to say at a technology conference, but what really brought me was the context for technology, because you have people, you have culture, you have technology, and the ways everybody works together. And I knew that needed to be improved, and that's what really excites me about this work.
Well, each of those is enough of a challenge on its own about having to change it. How did you do that?
So I started with 2 things. I started by saying what I was afraid of, and I said what I thought we could do to move forward together. And you asked me about me and my team. My team is really everybody at Smith. I'm a member of that team. They're my partners. And if I just go in my corner with my IT team and say we're going to do this all by ourselves, we're not going to succeed. So really working and not just saying that, but actually demonstrating that in our actions, that people could see that we really approach them as a team.
Yeah, well, Samantha, I think it's great to hear you say that, because I think whether it is the organization sort of tilting in a certain direction that made IT folks feel like, you're off on a separate island, you're in your own silo, it was always, I think, a bad way to look at stuff, right? Because then, later on it's a meeting, you say, why don't those people trust us? Why don't they invite us to their things? Like, well, too often I think IT teams, either because of the leadership they had or the organizational culture were ones, they were seen as almost like a group apart. So how has that benefited what you're doing at Smith, seeing like the whole community is your team?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's kind of obvious thing to say, but we're all in this together. And so when there's a problem and we've made a lot of improvements. So our problems are getting more interesting. Let's do that. We're solving some of the lower level ones that we should. And then actually that's an intentional outcome. You want to get past the sort of low level things you should do well, and then really grapple with the things that are kind of messy and then involve a lot of people. But one thing that I'm proud of is that when I first got to Smith and I asked everybody in my team, there's the classic CIO interview, you sit down with everybody. I asked each of them what they thought we should be doing that we weren't. Every single person had a good idea, but there wasn't really this sense of agency or how to make those things happen. So what we did was, put a lot of things together, the things the institution needed, things different departments needed, and the things that the IT team saw, and made a plan on what we were going to work on. So here we are. We're still working on those plans, but we've made a lot of progress.
So I loved how you phrased that. You said, you took care of some of the low-hanging fruits, so the problems are getting to be more interesting. Could you talk about what some of those are?
Absolutely. So students register for classes. It's our reason for being. We want that to go well. That really matters to everybody, not just to IT folks, that students have a good experience. But typically every time that we would have registration, we would all sort of, be very tense. Is that server going to fall over? Are students going to get mad? Are parents going to write us? Fortunately, we haven't had that for a couple of years now. And so from there, that's really very simple. That's just, getting in the door. From there, we can go to conversations about how do we best advise students? How do we get them into the right, pathways for them? And by we, it's not me. I'm using the royal we. Our faculty, our professional staff who work with students, how do they have those conversations? That's really what we should be doing to support education, not me on behalf of IT writing the emails to apologize for the servers falling over under load when all the freshmen or all the sophomores try to register.
Yeah. So Samantha, I get the sense from just having known you a few minutes, but it seems like you like the interesting problems, right?
I love the interesting problems, and I have great partners.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the key to this is both from a leadership perspective and then in the language we use. I'm a language person by training.
Okay.
There's an invitation to be part of the discussion, to hear what people are thinking, and to get feedback along the way once we make a decision. And our problems are certainly remaining pretty interesting, but again, not sort of hiding over in our corner, but sharing what we're thinking about and what we've tried and what we haven't, and making sure it isn't just our perspective.
Yeah. Well, I thought that was interesting what you said a moment ago too about being a language person. And I think from knowing lots of CIOs over the years, there's no, straight line career paths. But how did a language person get to be a chief information officer and VP of IT?
So my undergraduate major is French. My graduate degree is in French linguistics, but I went to an undergraduate college where everyone worked, and I worked in the computer center.
Okay.
So when I got to grad school, I had the opportunity to work on software development. Still thought I was going to be a faculty member one day, but then this interesting field started opening up of technology and learning. And so I got in early on in the 90s in some of those jobs and just kind of went on from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember one of a CIO who was at Charles Schwab in its go-go days. She had majored in music and I think also had a master's degree in music. And I said, is that an unusual bit of training to become a CIO? And she said, oh no, it's the perfect training.
It's perfect training. Also a musician. IT work is ensemble work. And so you have your own area of expertise, but you still have to listen to everyone around you. And you have to think about the people who are listening to what we're doing together. What's that like for them? Are we accomplishing, if you publicize a concert of one genre, is that what you're doing successfully, right? Yeah. It's really ensemble work.
Yeah. Well, the ensemble side of it too. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Miles Davis and, the different battles he had with various musicians, right? Each in his own right would have been a world-class, spectacular musician, but he would say, this isn't a solo gig here, right? We're a team. Let's work together.
And I think that from a management perspective, knowing what kind of music you're playing or what kind of sport you're playing, is it a solo activity? Is it a team activity? Like I played tennis in college. It's both, right? You do your own thing and then you're part of the team. And so if you're not aligned on what genre you're in or what sport you're in, it's no surprise that things are not going to go as well as you might think.
Yeah.
In spite of the improv factor, that's not really what we want.
Samantha, you talked a few minutes ago about culture. What's the culture that you want your team to have first? And I know your team extends out to the whole university community, but and so what is that culture that you want it to be and how do you get there?
Sure. So partnership, obviously, I've talked about that a lot. Just people feel like they're heard, that they're understood, that they can go to us and we're going to listen and not just say, oh, here they come again, right? Mm-hmm. But sort of a couple levels down, there are two really important things, and it's part of trust. We have to be able to say what we see, and we say that with trust, and we assume good intent. So one of the things we worked on, when I first arrived at Smith was constructive disagreement. We had some challenges that involved multiple teams, and we were kind of doing this. And we had to be able to talk about what we saw and sort of, there's a creative friction there, right? And we didn't really solve a particular set of challenges we had at the time until we got past that. And so that's not easy, but it's essential, especially if you're getting to the more interesting problems. Right? The little problems, you may not have to do that, but to the interesting problems, you have to do that.
It's a little bit like, I guess one of the big challenges Workday's trying to get after here is this, in big companies and universities, getting to a single instance of truth.
That's right.
Right? Because otherwise you've got lots of truth, but they're all different. They don't match. And if people aren't willing to be able to say what they see, then nobody really knows, well, what are we seeing? What should we see? What are we trying to see?
That's kind of the holy grail. In terms of the daily experience, but it's certainly been one of our big goals in adopting Workday. And our story is not unique, where we had a certain number of enterprise systems that were the official systems and some probably frightening number of side systems and shadow systems, probably some of which I still don't know about, that people were using to do things. They might copy data or they might have their whole process run over here and nobody would be aware of that. So that's been a huge part of our culture in terms of the what does the work look like when we implement a new system? What are we going to clean up? What are we going to do that's different moving forward? So single source of truth is a big phrase in our work and anybody who works with data.
Yeah. I remember there's one, I think it was it might have been a chief technology officer. We worked at a big mercantile exchange in the Midwest. I'm not going to name it, but it's in Chicago. But he said they had a certain flaw in one of their systems, but he said, I don't fix it because I like to call in, one of our sort of rapid response teams, and they go in and they patch it temporarily and they're seen as heroes. And he said, I think it's important for them to be seen as heroes. So that's why I am not fixing this problem permanently. I tried to, well, I wasn't sure how to answer that, but it seemed like, some sort of theoretical nice way to do it. But what a way to run a team.
That's fascinating. There's always a tension between effort and outcomes.
Yeah.
And it's human. We want to be acknowledged when we work really hard. We've just come through this and come through. We're still, going through the pandemic, but in the worst of the pandemic, just extraordinary effort, certainly from IT and everybody. And you want to recognize that. And it's important to recognize that. And, what happens as a result of that effort? Do you keep fixing the same problem over and over?
Yeah.
Or do you kind of figure out a way to move past that and get on to the next set? That's a hard thing to think about, but I think you have to weave both together.
Yeah. Samantha, there's a couple other things I wanted to ask you about, and then I want to be sure that any particular points you want to bring up that come to the table. One is, I'd love to know what it is that Workday has helped you with.
Absolutely.
And then the second one, and maybe it's related to that somehow, whether it's in higher ed or different industries, CIOs have been battling for some time to be seen as not some sort of quirky asterisk CXO over on the side, but rather full-fledged part, just like everybody else, but having to have a certain area of expertise. How do those, well, first, what are you doing with Workday, and has work with Workday helped you to be seen by your peers as a mainstream CXO?
Absolutely. So I told you, when I came to Smith a long time ago, 6 years ago, I knew we were going to have to make a lot of changes. And one of those changes was bringing in a new modern set of enterprise systems. And so we went through a process, adopted Workday. We started that work in summer of 2018. And that's allowed us to confront in a structured way the source of truth thing that you mentioned. But it's also helped us do something really important culturally, which is what do we need to do that's really special and unique to us? And what can we take from Workday, which has so much R&D go into it, so much input from across industries, that will be really strong for us? It'll feel different, right? So that was one of our core principles going in, is that unless there's a key strategic advantage, we're going to use what Workday has in the system. And sure, we're going to participate in, product design groups and all the ways of giving input. But just because we did it a certain way before, we're not going to try to perpetuate that. And so starting with the human resources and payroll and then finance, we went through that. Pandemic hit right as we were starting the student, but we managed to keep our momentum and not pause. I'm really proud of that because that took a lot of extraordinary work from people. But that means that we're doing the second thing that's really important, which is really focusing on the user experience. We didn't really have a key way of understanding. We all probably knew individually, but sort of putting a picture together about what's it like to be a student? What's it like to have to get up at 6:30 or 7 in the morning for your time slot? And then the server keels over, all that kind of stuff. That's worst case scenario, but it's anchored in truth and experience, right? Yeah. So this is part of a larger sort of emphasis on the shared experiences of different members of the community, students, staff, administrators, parents you mentioned, all of us, it's an us, right? Rather than just we're here and we're managing this and we don't really understand that. So we spent a lot of time thinking about the user experience. And we have a Center for Teaching and Learning on campus that has a phrase I love to borrow. They say, there are many ways to teach well, and all teaching is improvable. there are many ways to do IT, and all IT is improvable too. So we just, inspired by that, we just keep iterating and trying to make things better. So,
And so was that effort, like some of the things you've done with Workday across HR and finance and all, and this ability to get at the data that everybody's eager to see now, has that helped you be perceived, along with many other things I'm sure you've done, as just as a mainstream CXO?
I think to a great degree, I'm obviously instrumental, but not solo, in making this happen. My very first meeting with my peers in the president's cabinet when I arrived in this job, I said, I could do everything right with technology and still fail.
Yeah.
I need all of you.
Yeah.
And all of you has changed. There's been turnover, just as there has everywhere. But I think I and my team are seen as partners in a much stronger way. And partnership isn't just delivering utilities. Partnership is being in conversations. It's bringing people together. It's calibrating. Is this a big problem or a small problem? Will this help a large group of people? Will this solve something that's been bothering us for 3 years?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So I think that has been, that has helped me be positioned as a strategic partner.
Okay. That made me think of a buddy I had in college. He was a mechanical engineer, and he said his grandfather's a mechanical engineer. And he said, I've inherited what he called the engineer's dilemma, which is you spend 2 hours turning a 10-minute job into a 5-minute job. So that pursuit of some sort of perfection. But it sounds like you've worked your way around that, Samantha. What else would you like us to know about what you're doing at Smith and your own aspirations about how you want the work you do to be perceived?
We're at an educational institution. That's why we're there. And I think as we improve all these sort of systems that are woven into the experience of being at a learning institution, we also are in discussions about how technology is part of society. And so, as student, I would like to see a time where we engage students in thinking about how we improve things, thinking about how does technology inform what they learn? How does technology and the skills that they have matter in public policy and healthcare, in the arts, all these things. So by showing that we're partners in sort of the operations of the college, people gain trust in us, and then we can also facilitate and support some of those other discussions as well. Yeah.
Well, I spent the weekend with my 2-year-old granddaughter, and well, it's hard to think that technology would be anything but, an essential, indispensable part of her life. And, so imagine for people who are 10, 12, 15, a completely different mindset about themselves, technology, and what they're going to become in the future, which
Absolutely. My son is a high school senior, and he could use a mouse before he could walk. Job hazard of having parents in IT, I suppose, or family hazard. But just the assumptions that younger people who are privileged to have that experience have, and then just, we talk about this when CIOs get together, the general consumer market expectations of how friendly technology is, how easy it is to use, how long it takes to do a task.
Yeah.
That was very far away from the experience that many students had in educational IT until very recently. And understandably, they're like, why is this different? Why do I have to wait all this time? Why is it so clunky? I won't say we've solved all that, but the ease of use that you see out in the wider world increasingly, we really have to get better at that.
Yeah. Last thing about that, Samantha, I think it was a year ago, I had an opportunity to speak with Workday's co-founder and co-CEO, Neil Bussery. And a year ago, he was really getting on the notion of the UX.
Yeah.
He said, we can't afford anymore to say, well, it's passable, it's okay. He said in business, it's going to be indistinguishable from what people experience in their personal lives.
Absolutely.
And they're not going to accept something that is, it's like, well, that's how it is. They're not going to deal with it.
We hear that all the time from students to people like you and me who in our lives outside of the work context already see this.
Yeah.
Like, why does this take so long? Why do I need to do this? Or this is clunky. Everybody's a designer these days. And I actually think that's fun, even though it sometimes makes my life and my team's life a little more difficult. But that's a different kind of conversation. We would have never been able to have that conversation 5 or 10 years ago. And so companies like Workday that are really putting that emphasis on the user experience. So I think that's marvelous.
Fantastic. Samantha, any final thoughts you want to leave our audience with?
I'm just very glad to be here. And especially it's at an event like this where we have so many great thinkers and people who are really focused on moving the experience forward. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Samantha. This is, we've had a great conversation here with Samantha Earp, who's the CIO and VP of IT at Smith College. Samantha, thanks so much. It was a pleasure to meet you and have this chat.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, thanks to all of you for being with us at Cloud Wars Live. Hope things are going great for you. We'll see you next time.